I'm Pastor Mark Buto, and this is another Higher Things video short for Apologetics Wednesday. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. And that is the heart and center of our Christian faith. That is our joy and our hope that Jesus was alive on Easter, that the one who was crucified, God himself who had died and been buried in that tomb, was alive 3 days later, and that tomb was empty. And so we say as Christians, Christ is risen. And someone comes along and says, no, he didn't, because he didn't really exist and it's all just made up. Well, that's what people like to say. And over this week and next week, we're going to talk about 10 different ways that we can look at the resurrection and see that it's historically plausible, that it's reasonable, and that there's a lot of good evidence, even outside the Bible, that that tomb was empty. So let's kick it off. Reason number one. First of all, Jesus was a real human being. Even sources outside the Bible, such as Jewish and Roman historians, acknowledge that Jesus existed. Second of all, we know also from those same sources that Jesus died. The Romans were pretty good at crucifying people, and so we know that he was crucified there in 1st century Jerusalem. Third, Jesus' disciples despaired. Now here we look at the Gospels and see them as they are, as eyewitness testimony. But even if people don't believe everything in the Gospels, you can tell them, look, the people that wrote these Gospels certainly knew that Jesus had died, and they were certainly sad and despairing because their Lord had this happen to them. Fourth is that that tomb was empty on Easter. Now look, there are, again, external sources outside the Bible, indicate that all sorts of stories arose. Roman historians say that after Jesus died, a superstition arose, that he was raised from the dead. And there are Jewish stories that say a gardener came along and stole the body. Again, all of those stories indicate that something was going on, that that tomb was empty. And just think about it. The preaching of the gospel that Jesus was alive all began within walking distance of that tomb. Anybody could go look and see that that tomb was empty, or make up a story as to why it was empty if they didn't believe that Jesus was really alive. And fifth is that Jesus, being alive, turned the disciples' despair into joy. Think about it. The same disciples who were despairing, the same disciples who were so sad because their Lord had been killed, now preached the resurrection. They preached that Jesus was alive and they had seen him, and they went to gruesome and violent deaths rather than give up that story. Now, if they had just been making that up, trying to prove a point, they probably wouldn't have died for it. But they knew, because he had been raised, that he was alive, that they would go even to death, and therefore they knew that they would rise too. So there's the first of the 5 reasons that you can share with others and talk to them about why it is reasonable, why it's historically plausible, why there's evidence even from outside our own gospel readings in the scriptures that Jesus was risen from the dead and that tomb was empty on Easter. And so we say, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. And that is our hope. And make sure you check out the Higher Things article this week. Pastor Fisk lays out all 10 reasons for us. You can find that on our website at the link here. And see you again next week as we tackle the other 5 reasons that you can share with your friends and tell them why you know that Jesus is risen from the dead. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. I'm Pastor Mark Buto. This has been another Higher Things video shorts.